about now? Is that a little better? Yeah. Great. Perfect. Before we get started, I'd like to recognize our sponsors. I always get into the script and forget to do this, and it's very important at the Chamber to have our great corporate sponsors and everybody supporting these initiatives that we have monthly. So I'd like to first off start off by thanking Blue Cross Blue Shield, Midlands Biz, Columbia Metropolitan, Sign It Quick, Sun Solutions, and as always, the Richland County Public Library for having us, hosting us in this great venue. And last but not least, Travis O'Neill with Oliver Gospel Mission brought us the coffee today from the registry. So thank you for doing that. And without further delay, we'd like to welcome our two leaders in great challenging times in both your counties, but opportunities as well. Neither of these gentlemen need an introduction as they are, guiding the future of their respective counties, working with their council members. They have a challenging task of managing budgets, overseeing economic development, improving land zoning issues, and working with constituents on transportation issues and a host of topics too long to list. The recent months of COVID constraints has challenged the county and others to conduct business to meet with the various needs of the community while seeking feedback and providing information. We thought it'd be great to bring Todd and Paul in this morning to talk to our business leaders about the issues facing us today and the opportunities for tomorrow. We thought the best way to start off would be if Todd and Paul, whichever gentleman wants to go first, tell us a little bit about yourself personally, your role with the county, and responsibilities, size of the county, number of employees, total budget, and length of service. So Todd, if you want to start, that'd be great.
Sure. And
thank you for being here today.
I was going to say, Macon, thank you for invite to Carl and Susan. Thank you for allowing me to come over and speak to a group that I rarely don't get to see very often, not in a group setting, but sometimes individually. So thank you for that opportunity to come today. Also, too, real quickly, too, I was saw the news this morning, December 7th. Some of us didn't know about what December the 7th is, Pearl Harbor Day. I know one of those things that as we were talking a while ago about the river lines. And the Greenway is, I think, is one of probably the #1 community projects that the counties and the cities have come together to create for not just the people that live here, but those that visit here with us. So when I was thinking about December 7th this morning, we turned the airfield, because of the response of December the 7th, the airfield out in Columbia turned into the CAE, which again, Richland, Lexington, and the city of Columbia formed to make our metropolitan airfield. So from my perspective, Lexington, Richland, Columbia have always had a really good working relationship as a region. So just want to tell that. And I have the opportunity to come over on this side of the river, as it's sometimes coined, that because again, I don't have the opportunity to speak very often to visit the community in Richland and city. Real quickly, I'm in my 19th year, and that probably will tell you a little bit about some of my possible insanity. And I'll be starting in January, if we're willing, the 20th year in office. We have a little over 1,500 employees in Lexington County. General and non-general fund budget. It all totals up to a little over $300 million. Let's see, what else were you asking me, Megan?
I think you covered all, just a little bit about yourself personally. Wow.
Yeah, personally, well, as far as I can trace back, I'm 5th generation Lexingtonian. On my mother's side, and probably 3 generations in Lexington on my father's side, but there was another 2 generations in Newberry County. So finished University of South Carolina here, self-employed. When I got married, I didn't realize I was married in business, so I ended up tied into a family business called Wheelie's Body Shop in West Columbia. It's right on Meeting Street at the top of the hill, and you go across the Fairway Street Bridge. I have 1 child. Don't throw anything at me, but she's at the University of Georgia. She finished this May, again, God willing. So I've been married for 32 years to Michelle Wheelie. So that's the first one I
Great. Thank you for the overview. And Paul, just to say it again, just tell us about your length of service, responsibility of chairman, size of county, number of employees, total budget, and then a little bit of your personal background, as much as you want to share.
Thank you, Rebecca. Good morning. And let me thank the chamber for this opportunity. Thank everyone for showing up this morning. Let me just start out a little bit about myself. I know a little bit about Columbia, Richland County. I was born about 6 blocks from here in the Vista area. And what's unique about that is it's just that when I look around and think about the changes since my youth, it's just simply incredible. Now, so being a lifetime resident of Richland County, I think helps me do what I did. I'm a graduate of the University of South Carolina. I always wondered what was the significant benefit of my degree. I'm a psychologist by profession, and I've taught at Lexington College for the past 30 years, teaching psychology, serving as a department head as well as a director. And I always wondered when I taught that abnormal psychology class or neuropsych class, hoping that it was benefiting my students. But what I learned was more benefit to me as a county council member, dealing with my colleagues and my constituents. So that was an unknown blessing. I attended the University of South Carolina for my grad and undergraduate studies. But I spent my entire adult life as a public servant. I served prior to becoming a member of the Richland County Council. I served on the Richland School Board for 6 years, chaired that school board for 2 of those 6 years. I've been on the County Council now for 30 years. Of those 30 years, I've chaired County Council for 8 of those years. So we're pretty involved in our community. Now, with all that said, you need to understand I was a child prodigy. I started early. As it relates to our budget, our general fund budget, which includes a lot of stuff regarding public safety, public works, things of that nature, is a little less than about $200 million. Our overall budget is going, because we fund the school districts to libraries, things of that nature. Our overall budget comes right around about $1 billion. We're only responsible for, again, primarily responsible for that $200 million. For those of you who are always concerned about taxes and so forth, I can tell you that part of the budget that we are ultimately responsible for, which is that general fund budget, your taxes have not increased in the last 3 years as a result of the general fund budget that we're responsible for. That's important to know. In my personal life, I was married to Deborah Livingston, who passed about 5 years ago. I have 2 children, 2 adult children, a son and a daughter. Daughter's in Atlanta, the son is here. I think I've covered it all, unless I missed one.
No, I think you did well. And I've muted my mic. Can everybody hear me okay? So there's less feedback. Great. So we've got some prepared questions, but I'm also going to allow time for the members of the audience to ask questions as well. And some of these, depending on their answers, I may combine. Paul, Todd, since you went first, Paul, I'm going to let you have this question. It's one of 2 questions I'm going to combine. So I think they work well together. This first question is, if you will, what is the current state of your county? And secondly, what would you highlight as the main accomplishments of 2021? So current state of your county and main accomplishments of 2021. I thought those would be good to combine together.
Let me say, I am extremely impressed and pleased with the current state of Richland County. Many of you are aware, this past year, we had 5 new council members come on board. And those 5 new council members asked me to serve as their chair, and they'll be committed to doing what they thought needed to be done to help kind of move forward. And they have done that this past year. We managed to work through COVID with very little problems because of their commitment and hard work. We managed to resolve a lot of key issues that were in the way as it relates to DOR, our program development management team, our P cards, things of that nature. We've got through all of that with this particular group. We hired a new clerk of our council. We hired a new attorney. We moving forward successfully with our transportation planning program. We had the best year in over 20 years of economic development. So for us, it's been a tremendous year. And I'm proud of my colleagues for working with me to make that happen. What's the second part of that question?
Just the highlighting your accomplishments and what the current state of your county is. So thank you.
And what is this year with, like I said, with economic development, but what happened there, and the thing that just mentioned is our major accomplishments. And like I said, I can't commend my colleagues enough in terms of what we did with COVID and getting out of that with very little problems.
Okay. Thank you very much. Todd, the same questions, however you want to address.
Sure. I would just say that the current status is that has been since my time in office is that Lexington is fiscal tax. We don't have a lot of wild swings in taxation. We kept that to a minimum. The growth has allowed us to do some of that, both not just residential growth, but the commercial and industrial growth. So currently, I would say though that we've entered into an area of uncharted water, so to speak. First ever. Not have lived in the Midlands region the last 6 to 9 months and didn't know that there was a moratorium going on in Lexington County, which is first ever. That has come to an end. But current status again is that steady as it goes, with the exception again of the moratorium, which is a little something that would be. I wouldn't have foreseen that in the past, and I'm not sure that having gone through it this calendar year, half of the calendar year, that we may go through another one like again. So that's the current state of affairs. Our economic development equally has really done well this year. Obviously, the announcement from Nephron in excess of $300 million in our industrial park. We established it at not one but 2 manufacturers there, which we're most desirous of that in the Saxon-Gotha Park. So we probably have about 15 projects right now that are in various stages, from the initial contact through the hopefully final negotiations. So some of those are current industry, and some of them are yet to be. We hired a new administrator this year. That process was about 3 months. We hired our IT director, Mr. Lynn Sturkey. Never been a county administrator, but brings most of his business background from the private market in the IT business, and has done exceedingly well. His transition into government administration is really, really well. So we're proud about that.
We got more questions, so y'all are
Sure.
about to get.
Sure.
And you're probably both of y'all are probably exhausted covering the subject, but it's important to everyone here, and I knew you expected that to answer this. So next section, we're going to come back to economic development, job growth. Y'all both with Jeff and Sarah have very qualified employees leading that. They're very easy to work with, and we're excited to work with them as well. So we're going to come back to that. But going back to zoning, moratoriums, growth, we have a set of questions, and I'll let Todd go first here and then flip back to Paul. So the questions are the A, B, and C question. Each of you recently worked with growth issues, zoning moratoriums on buildings, etc. highlight the final outcome in your respective county regarding the moratorium and next steps. In your case, you have that final outcome. I know, Paul, that y'all are still working on that outcome. What are the overarching issues, and how do you and your council plan to incorporate some of what you heard from the various publics in future work in regards to development, zoning, public input? And then the last question is moratorium's impact perception on business-friendly environment. Do you think decisions made will present a negative or positive image for growth? So starting with you, Todd, if you want to highlight for those that aren't familiar what y'all resolved with your overlay district and kind of a positive, negative impact of it.
Yeah, and I think we probably say what precipitated the entire need or request that you enter into a moratorium. Just real quickly, I pulled some data before I left the office yesterday, and total residential building permits in Lexington County in 2018 was 2148. Of those, 1592 were single-family residential attached homes. Okay, I know you're not going to do the math so quickly, but I'll just let you know that it's going to increase as I go. So 19, it was 2269, and then 2020, the one that really surprised us, and I think what May has brought about, it said, look, we've got to take a little harder look. We've got to do some adjustment here. And by the way, the building industry agreed that there needed to be some sort of change in how we do business. What we ended up with, I don't know that there was any agreement, but the need to be able to go in and make some adjustments. But 2148, 19, 2269, 19, and 2643, a 16% increase in building permits in a pandemic year. Everything is supposed to be suppressed and everybody stay at home. People aren't going to work. But building permits went up 16%. Of that, the single family homes went up 11. You had an 11% increase in single family residential from 19 to 20. And as of, let's see, September this year, the end of September, we are at 72% of where we were in 20. So we've got now October, November, December left. Quarter of the year left here with only 28% to match where we were as a pandemic. So that is what precipitated, I believe, the discussion that started about a moratorium. And I don't know that it was ever intended for a moratorium, other than the fact that we just needed a pause. We needed to hit the pause. Okay. So in doing so, it was 6 months of continuing discussion and meetings. I can't remember a time in my entire tenure that we met as many times in a year that we met this last year. And that would be committee meetings and council meetings, full council. So whatever we ended up with as a result is not because of lack of effort. However, there are, there were some differences, not only opinion, but some factual data that we were using to try to make a decision on what we came up with in a way of finalizing zoning product. And a lot of it is got to do with road classification. It's got to do with required open space, preservation of natural resources, mainly what is known as trophy trees. So, I think storm, and I should back up too, is that the building permit for the measurement we can look at to see that it's continuing to grow. The demand is there. And that was the real discussion that we had among ourselves. The demand is not going to change. Actually, we were talking a little bit before here. I think the demand is probably going to increase. That's just kind of look back to look at the data and then try to forecast forward. some of what we already see, we track where you come from. When you're going to make an application in Lexington County for 4% on your home, we keep a track of where your last address. So we know, for the most part, what regions of the country you're coming from, or regions of the local market. You know, how many people from Richland and Lexington, Newberry, Charleston. So I think that demand is going to increase, because now what we have seen here recently is that a lot of those folks that are coming from other market areas, because they're really local. They don't require to be in a building like they're sitting in today to go to work. They can sit in a spare room in their home and look out over Lake Murray and go to work. I don't know, a laptop. Or if they need, physically be in a place to meet, plane, car, or train. They can get around. I was in Texas about a month ago, and some guys in the commercial banking business. I see Chuck Whipple here with us this morning. Great conversation. Guys in commercial business, commercial banking business. They don't want to. I don't know if that's relevant here. I don't know. They don't want to. They need to meet with the client. They'll go with the client. So I think the demand, because of the quality of life, because of the cost of living, because of the weather, because of all the things that make our region positive, is going to increase that demand side for housing. Great. So, and the moratorium has already, I believe, is created, as sometimes government does. And it's one of those things, you take your policy making duties very seriously. You don't want to create unintended consequences. I don't know how many folks follow government really close, but you talked about Act 388, I'm sure Paul knows 388. We had that discussion with people in state government, all the unintended consequences that came about with 388. It has a tremendous impact on local governments and really the fund itself, right? So the moratorium, I believe, is going to probably inadvertently create some unintended consequences, which are going to have to be addressed in the future. Because if not, you're going to create some of the very things you're trying to prevent. And a lot of what was thrust behind this is, and we've demonstrated this a number of times publicly, that moratoriums do not fix traffic. Moratoriums do not make cars go away. They don't. Whatever traffic's here, the only way that works is that you have to completely discourage living in the geographical areas that people take their cars somewhere else. We don't see that happening. My friends here in Richland County, I know the discussion about what we just went through. I would just encourage you to kind of again look and see some maybe the positive and the negative that's come out of what we came up with as a final product. So business friendly, I think that was one of the questions part of it, business friendly.
Just I guess the perception of moratoriums is that,
well, it hasn't yet because it's still fresh. It had a negative impact on any of our development activity. I was asked many years ago, and I say many years ago, I guess when I always get this wrong, Paul, but Jitsu, I guess is the fiberglass maker. Juicy, yeah. What do you think about that, Todd? Your neighbor there got a big giant hit. I'm like, I applaud him. I said, absolutely, I applaud him. I said, because that just demonstrated to the rest of the world that this region is worth investing. I said, just because it landed there doesn't mean that people that live in Lexington County aren't going to have opportunities for a job. I mean, we just can't work that out, can we, Paul? If we get someone to come into our county and set up a tent and do the business, you got to live in Lexington County and work here. Sorry, it just doesn't work. So again, I applaud that. shows that you're worthwhile as an investment. It says a lot, I think, to the rest of the world, if not, definitely the region, the Southeast region, that is. So I don't know yet that the moratorium is having negative impacts at that scale, but I could probably tell you that in the future it may have some impact on localized economy, i.e. anybody that touches the building industry, whether you're finance, whether you're flooring business, roofing business, lumber business, insurance business. I mean, housing is a hub. We talk about that a lot in our discussion. It's a hub. And it's got all these spokes that come off of it, right? So industry is a hub, and you just try to create as many spokes as you can get off that hub. So I'm cognizant of that. I think that most of the membership of our council is cognizant of that. I'll just say this, I don't think it's going to have an immediate January 22 impact. There are about 7,000 available lots that are under the pre-moratorium plan that can be constructed. Okay? But as any other business, they're looking out, they're forecasting too, so they're going to be preparing for 23 and 24 because they're not going to stop work. So those, I still think those lots are still going to be constructed upon. I think demand is still going to be there. There's going to be a demand, I feel, sure, for 1,000 homes. What else was it?
I think you cover everything.
Okay.
That's great. And we're going to come back to the presentation, so I'll come back to that. And Paul, would you mind pulling your microphone a little bit closer? And I know that you're kind of, I wouldn't maybe start by describing your situation, not necessarily being a moratorium.
I was going to make that clear for you.
But the rezoning and remapping districting that you're looking at as opposed to stop work that Lexington had.
Right. And again, Richland County does not have a countywide moratorium. But what we are engaged in is updating our land use plan, which is a requirement of a state requirement to do that every 10 years. And keep in mind, in doing that, I mean, it's extremely important for everybody that we do this, because we want to know where and how growth and development should occur in our county. I think everyone else would want to know that as well. The usage of both areas we're concerned about. How we look at development. How we plan over time. What resources are available and we need is what we look at in terms of this land use plan. Now, it is true that our staff recommended, as they worked through this plan, that we consider a 6-month moratorium on rezoning. We had several discussions with that, with the community, with home builders, anyone who's engaged in the discussions. So the decision was to not move forward with that 6-month moratorium, but allow individuals to file for a zoning change, but that change had to be consistent with the new plan that we just passed, as opposed to the current rezoning. And the reason why that's important is because as we move forward, we need that kind of consistency and continuity, as opposed to having someone to rezone based on the rules and regulations right now. There's one caveat to that, though, is one council member who was in District 11, I think it was, asked that that district be carved out and a moratorium on rezoning be allowed in that particular district. Now, of course, because I'm so concerned about continuity and consistency, I was one who chose not to support that, because I think it leads to a bit of confusion in the county. We only have one district that is having a moratorium as opposed to the entire county. But keep in mind, I think what we're doing is important. And looking at the plan, even talking to some of the home building developers and so forth, I think there's a lot of advantages to what we're looking at now. I think we look at new and different, unique developmental patterns. I think I think it's going to make residential development more flexible. I think you can get rid of some of the concerns you had as it relates to minimum size lots, standards, and things of that nature. I would say safeguards now to I think open space, other lot sizes, and so forth. I see some advantages too. Currently, 70% of our property in the county is zoned rural. Right now, I think we have challenges getting property zoned because folks there are saying not in my backyard. But I think with the new zoning and mapping, and that's already zoned residential, and we don't have much rural, we have to make as many rezoning changes. I think there's some advantages to I think what we're talking about doing, and I think a lot of that has to do with some of your input. I think we're very attentive to that, and we'll continue to do so. But I feel pretty good about where we're going. Right now, you're in the mapping stage for our land use plan, and you'll be engaged in that before council making an approval. You'll get a chance to review that mapping and provide your feedback and your suggestions. So I feel good about where we are with that right now.
Great, perfect. Thank you, Ben. We have 2 to 3 more questions, and to allow time for our guests to ask our questions as well, we can keep it limited to 2 to 3 minutes if possible each. That would be great. So circling back to growth opportunities, economic development, how do we move the market and attract more businesses to the area, whereby creating more jobs, economic spin-off, and growing tax base? And I guess that's a kind of a loaded question, but maybe more pointed, how do you work with Sarah Johnson and Jeff Rubel and your council in supporting them and giving them some guidance to ensure that we're, on level playing field with Spartanburg County, Greenville County, Charleston County, the areas throughout the state that have seen more robust growth?
How do we work with development folks?
Well, first summarizing the job attraction and how you work with your development team.
Well, first of all, we provide them with all the proper resources they need and request to move forward with development. We just completed this past year a economic strategic plan, making sure we implement that plan, provide the resources and new staffing that they may need in that particular area. We also spend a lot of time with our current businesses. One person also just dedicated to working and trying to build current businesses, and I think we're very successful for that and doing so. Making sure that we provide the infrastructure that's required. For example, right now we work on a lot of property by the micro neighborhood, and what we're doing there is trying to build a new large industrial park there to help with that.
That stop people asking that question. How critical was it to land in Jushi already having the Shopford Park in place and earmarked for that specific
That's another part of the infrastructure in place. That, and we talk about transportation growth program. One of the main goals of that program was to improve the development opportunities. And by cutting that road, Shop Road through there, made it possible. And now we've got getting close to $1 billion development Jushi plant and Mark Anthony, Big One, and so forth. So that's what we did. We just had to create opportunity to make sure they can flourish.
Right. Thank you. Todd, same question for you.
Yeah, listening to Paul talk, it's similar in nature with us here in Lexington County too. So typically, economic development it's just a term that really gets used sometimes. It's kind of all encompassing. But there's economic development in the city of Columbia, city of Casey, town of Lexington, salon, restaurant, men and women's clothing, right? Typically, our interactions are with industry, manufacturing, large scale investment. So we don't typically get into the Main Street type economic development. We assist in the cities that are looking for assistance. We'll whoever help is allowed to us. But I would say this too, is that some of those that have been subject to understanding county level economic development, it's a very slow, deliberate, patient process. And when you say, how do we compare to other people in the upstate and the coast, there are a couple of different models. I don't know. This is that we don't have Wall Street money buying land and standing buildings. Okay? That's the typical model you're going to find on the coast and in the upstate. We're financing. We're public financing industrial parks. We do have some private investment of such from some parcels, but large scale preparation for industry is really being done through taxpayer finance. So that's been a model that it's not always been the case. My friend Chuck Whipple's in the room with us. He'll remember when we go back 2006. Lexington County never had an industrial park. I was chairman at the time. I was fortunate enough to be a member of that body, which agreed to establish that. And has proved really beneficial and to not just Lexington County, but to the region. So, Chamber Business and Technology Park and the Lexington Regional Park all have different aspects of what they bring to the market. So, we have a very small economic development department. Sarah has worked with Chuck at the time. Chuck was our director. She's well educated in the subject, is experienced and gaining experience daily. And we've just tried to take the be prepared model. The time is right. Hopefully be ready to strike, so to speak. All the infrastructure being in place. As Paul said, they're just trying to get something up and going, established there on the 77 corridor. We're continuing in that level of economic development. I refer to it sometimes, it's almost like building an apartment house. Some of the industry, all they want to do is move the furniture in, go to the store and fill the fridge and turn the TV on. I'm living. I don't want to do anything. I just want to move my furniture in, turn the TV. So when they want to get going, they want to move the equipment in, plug in the computers, and start with it. So again, those that have private money probably are a little bit more fortunate than those that are having to rely on the government. But it all works out. There's some aspects of that development that you can't change. Some of this, you can put everything else that everybody says you need. Some of the oddest things, make a decision to kill it.
Great for answers. The last question before I turn it over to the audiences and for their questions, we'll have 10 to 15 minutes for everyone to go along and ask as many questions as you want. But both of y'all touched on infrastructure and transportation. So we'd love for y'all to talk about what you see as your current biggest transportation issue and kind of what you have on your agenda for transportation improvements over the next 5 years.
Right. Well, again, 2014, the county agreed to put on penny tax on the ballot. And in doing so, you can decide that you can do those projects that you list on the ballot, pay as you go is the term. As the collections come in, use those funds and pay for the projects, or you can bond those projects. The appetite for the penny back then because in Lexington County, it's a little bit different than in Richland County. And I know it's just words mean that ours would be a capital in transportation, which means that if we bring a capital meeting in place on the ballot, the school district can apply for a project on the ballot. Any municipality can apply, any special taxing district can apply for a project. So I guess the philosophy or mythology that went behind that ballot formation back in 2014 was, well, all people to try to get behind it, that, you know, everybody needs a piece of the pie going, right? But huge fatal state. And in turn, also, you're going to bond your projects. As we've been instructed, and we follow really closely legal advice in Lexington County to try to stay out of the headlines, stay out of the courtroom, to make sure that, you know, doing things, you know, according to statute. So if you're going to bond your products, you got to tell the public, look, if collections aren't enough to cover the bond payments, the county's got to back that through ad valorem tax collection. You just might as well just put a big, giant, flashing sign that says, your taxes are going up. It's not true, because first thing is that who in their right mind would then try to bond projects to the max of the collections? And we discussed it and said, look, wherever the bond payments are, we're not going to issue bonds for projects that would exceed 80% of collections. And by the way, back then, 14, it was, you know, I'm sure I can tell everybody, it was just under $40 million. 14, with 1 penny collection, on sales transaction less. The last numbers we got from DOR is somewhere around 53 million. So you can see it's grown well over $10 million since the last time we discussed it. We haven't fully made that decision yet. It's more than likely going to put back on the ballot for other people like to again. That's the only reasonable way that a lot of us that have looked and turned this Rubik's for time and time again in Lexington. How do you fund your transportation challenge? Because the state's not doing it. DOT, but I've said that publicly a number of times in council meetings and forums just like this. NCDOT is the guy getting in the traffic congestion business. They've already told us many times, spending money on bridges, recall, interstates, and rural safety. So if you need turn lanes, if you need traffic lights, go see your CTC. So that's probably the #1 challenge in Lexington County is traffic management. Now, with that being said, I really don't know how COVID is going to affect that. I don't know if any of y'all recognize this or not, but for some reason, in the middle of the day, the traffic just does not seem what it was in years past. Now, early morning hours, late evening hours, people still are, transit work. But a lot of what's going on during the day, I guess you'd call that commerce, okay? I just noted that my office is right up here on Meeting Street, straight up across the Railway Street Bridge at the top of the hill. I have not, and I don't know, it just doesn't seem that the traffic is there. So I know DOT is evaluating the number of their projects through ADT, average daily traffic. Right? So again, if people are tending to stay put, I didn't just stay home, but stay put more often than they are traveling, I don't know how that's going to affect some of the funding that's going to come about. So, but I do know this is that if you can't provide a local collected finance revenues, you're not getting the federal and state help because you've got so-called things, something to the table to get everything.
Very familiar answer. I was actually in a meeting with Forest Acres the other day, and somebody asked about burying the power lines on Forest Drive. And Sean Greenwood said we don't have $18 billion, and we don't know where we get it from. So it's
City of Casey's been,
yeah, your answer is very very similar to what he said.
that topic comes up about every 5 years.
Yeah.
And every time it comes up, the price goes up.
Yeah. So, Paul, whatever you'd like to highlight on the same subject, great.
Transportation is not a major problem in Richland County, and I can tell you it's even getting better. And that was because of our investment in transportation penny. In my 30 years on county council, I think one of the most transformative things that we've done was transportation penny. Because its impact on our quality of life, its impact on economic development, I go on and on and on. And that's why I think we're okay with transportation in Canada, and we will be for a while. And that's why it's important to invest. We wonder why a lot of things doesn't happen because we're not willing to make the required investments to make sure those things happen. So when we look at our greenways now, we look at transit, all those things have significantly improved. And as I said, I think we'll continue to do so. So I'm pretty pleased with where we are. When we started the program, our program developed team back at the time, put together a tremendous plan. We brought it in-house and using that same plan to continue to move forward. So I think we're in good shape.
I saved y'all the last question because I figured somebody in the audience would ask about it. But the last question, and I want to turn it over to the audience because I'm sure some of them brave out there would ask the same thing, was just relative to discussing your state tax law. And I think some of y'all covered all that. So if no one has any questions, the audience will come back and end with that. But I'd like to open it up to the crowd right now to ask any questions. You just want to raise your hand and identify yourself. Yes, ma'am.
I have two questions. First of all, I'm Jerry Fowler, and I own a business in Lexington County. And I also work in the Lexington Chamber of Commerce, so thank you, Todd, for being our board of directors. My first question is about employment workforce. The economic development does an awesome job. Sarah does an awesome job. Sergio's doing an awesome job with his own business. But these people are coming into business and they don't know what they're saying. We have people coming out of school who do not know what they want to do. Maybe they don't want to go to a 4-year college, but they don't know what's out there. There needs to be some kind of internship, some kind of collaboration between education in order for these companies who are struggling to find a job. Are you guys doing anything to help with that collaboration?
I'll start. Yes. Remember, we both provide funding to Middle and Central College, for example. And in doing so, we work closely in collaboration with them as it relates to workforce development. We're saving doing that. That is a high priority. As a matter of fact, we begin now to try to look at some unique and innovative programs, internships, with the means of making that happen. We recognize when we talk about economic development, quality of life, we understand the significance of making sure that we have folks who work very qualified to do the job. So that's a big initiative. Now that's a part of our strategic plan, economic development strategic plan, to understand that we need the talent in the workforce. So we're working on that.
Did Angela ask you to ask that question? Because I say that because she and I have had that very conversation numerous times. And you do highlight what I consider a hole in the economic development, I guess, process in which we do. However, there are some positives in workforce development. Lexington School District 1 has a long-standing program, which I'm sure knows, the Mission Scholars Program. They work with, like I said, the Career Center, Lexington School District 2, their Cape Center, which has some relationship with industry. Nephron is showing great interest in workforce development with kids. Now, the key to all this is that how early do we start? Because there have been some really good successes in the upstate. The industry has, it's part of the county, is, if I remember right, has some industry involvement with high school students in their manufacturing process. I can't remember. Yes. Paul and I can vote, spend money, buy land, build roads, put water and sewer in the ground, stand buildings. We can do everything except put. And that's one of the great things the industry is looking at. That's one of the challenges actually that allows us here in the Midlands to still be somewhat competitive, is because we do have a available workforce now today. But that's going to be a challenge. But the key to this now is how early do you start? And I think the picture has been painted that everybody should have been before. Maybe so, but maybe not. Average wage in that right now is $70. So those people over there are making more money than the people they borrow money from, you know, to buy a home, their first home. Yeah. That's average. It's 1,000 plus employees. Yeah. So you know, key, I think, to all this is to have available trained workers. Trained in the manner in which industry is looking. We have culinary institute, which is a great thing. Okay? But what the growth is could be advanced manufacturing. Strange talking about this, but the guy in the audience knows as much as this or more than I do. And Chuck Whipple. You know, we've had this conversation ourselves. I mean, advanced manufacturing are the things that we want to go out and look, train young folks. Billings Tech, Paul may agree or disagree with, to me, is probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, partner we have in economic development in our region because of what they provide and how easy they are to work with an existing industry or income. Preparation is just, it can't be said enough. And that's the thing that needs to be highlighted more. Sarah Johnson believes that too. So we are having some conversations continually with the schools to prepare the workforce of the future. It's not, as soon as you leave graduation, what do I do now? I have any idea, no direction. You know? And I'm not, again, I don't know that the 4-year degree program is the answer. Take our hospitals, for instance. Billings Tech, I mean, without Billings Tech, are there any nurses in this market? All 200, I think, that come out of that program are employable the day they leave. They're actually being probably pursued before graduation, right? So, given that demand feature again is that we probably did if we could graduate 400. I don't know. I'm not going to tell know his business, but we could put 400 out.
I'll take it.
There you are. So from an industry manufacturing perspective, if we could put 150 kids, I call them kids, they're young adults, with some sort of preparation to go to the workforce, and again, allow those employers to say, you're worthwhile, put the expense to put you in a place like where Paul works at Lexington Tech for advanced manufacturing, continuing training. It just makes us a better region, better prepared.
You're right about
great question.
Yeah, we're right about compensation, as there are a lot of manufacturers locally that are, discreetly going to their employees and practically giving them bonuses to keep them play defense, and so it's raising, their stature and their ability to have a better way of life. So I think that will continue. We've got time for one more question. 2 more. How about this? Y'all can keep with it. State your name, ask a question, and we can sort of keep it maybe 2 minutes each. And we'll let John go last.
I'm Alan Hutto, the CEO for the Building Industry Association. Chairman Cullum, I just wanted to thank you for being the pro-business and voice of moderation council that's now dominated by anti-growth members, so as we've seen since y'all passed, if not the most strict, one of the strictest zoning ordinances in the state that's going to have significant downstream impacts on things. And like you said, you know, words have consequences. And, you know, I think the perception of Lexington is changing. And that's not your fault. Like I said, you've tried to be pro-business and moderate. Chairman Livingston, you know, thank you. You know, we came to Richland County Council with our concerns about that rezoning moratorium. You know, the council members listened to us, and you know, we had a good third discussion on that, and y'all changed course on that. And you know, certainly that's something we appreciate. You know, sitting around, you know, with a bunch of developers last night, we're talking about how good, you know, Richland County has been to work with recently. So, you know, so we appreciate that. And I would say the anti-growth sentiment we're seeing, we see some in Richland, we see a lot in Lexington, you know, that's going to have impact or it's have consequences. And, you know, a lot of developers are now looking outside of Lexington and Richland. They're looking at Kershaw, Newberry, Fairfield, and Orangeburg. I'm from Orangeburg. I never thought that. But, you know, I just want to thank both of you and just kind of comment on where we are on the residential side of things.
Well, I would just say this real quickly. We've had a number of conversations publicly about conversation ends up being controlling the range. And I've always maintained you can't control it. You can't control it. You can manage it, but you can't control it. Hopefully what's in place is a management tool, because it started out and a lot of it became through as a control mechanism. It was a control mechanism for no one to up. Free markets just don't allow it to happen. They don't. I think that what will probably take place is that controlling feature will prove itself in that somewhat 100 square mile area. What I mean by that is that there's in the Lake Murray overlay, it's on the north side of the lake, which encompasses all of the entire area of Lexington County, which provides out of check. And then you've got the south part of the lake, which is west of Lexington. And for the most part, not quite halfway to Lexington, Leesville, and Kilburn. So it's about 18% land mass of the entire county, which has been identified here. As markets do, as free markets do. I think you're going to see investment outside of that area, obviously. Now, whether or not it's in Lexington County or the borders of Lexington County, I don't know. I think that is solely dependent on land prices, ability to construct outside of that newly established overlay. Very similar to what was prior to the moratorium. So I'll go back to what I said earlier is that I don't think there's going to be an immediate impact to the local industry. However, when we get beyond 22, entering to 23, I think is then when we're really going to see the direction of what's going to happen. But there are a lot of things that can change that. You know, in industry placement, if we could announce, or myself could announce a little large, 250, 300 employee announcement, it's going to create that demand again for the housing. And the market's going to decide the best place to put the housing in the most profitable way to put the housing. A lot of discussion in 6 months about developers and their intentions and things like that. So most of that I've just tried to shut off is just emotion and try to stick with good, solid economic fact. So, but yeah, I think it's. I don't use the term jury stir out because someone may get protected or not. I just don't know that.
That's a good term.
I don't know yet. And there's a lot of time. There's a lot of things that when things like this happen, we talk about pendulum swings. You know, hopefully you don't want to swing it too far. When you do, you're going to see some consequences. So I don't know yet what we're going to see come from it, but I do believe that whatever comes from it, there are going to be some decisions that will be later on that we revisit this topic.
And one last question for John Lumpkin, and I'm sorry we don't have more time, but these gentlemen are very generous with their schedules and have other things to attend, so I'm not trying to police everyone, but trying to stay with Henry's giving me the way back there, making sure
I'll take about it. I'm John Lumpkin. I'm a local business person, and in my, I'll call it takeaway here, but I see a region. This is a region. Lexington and Richland County is one region. It has been one region. Some months ago, Joe Murgo sat where Todd sat, Leonardo Brown sat where Paul sat, they're the county administrators, and they spoke with one voice. Todd, when you said, when someone came to you and started yapping about usage, you said, I'm cheerleading that.
Sure.
But for the right reason. Some years ago, the then chair of Richland County Council, Harry Garfield, and I think Jerry Howard was chair of Lexington County Council, went out on the Gervais Street Bridge, stopped traffic, and celebrated an investment coming in the region that happened to go in Lexington County. A month later, came back on the same bridge, Harry Garfield, and Bob Coble was the mayor of Columbia, and another election mayor came in, celebrated an investment that was happening to go in the Richland County. Then you see, so we got one region here, and we that's in business groups I'm associated with, yours been associated with, considers this a region. If you know both banks and all the right reasons, that's what I'd like to just emphasize.
And I'd like to finish by saying thank you both. I actually have sorry, go ahead, Paul.
To get it off my chest, can I respond to one thing, a question I expected that I did not get, that I heard about all the time?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
And that's just a question of, comparing Richland County all the time with Charleston, Greenville, and this idea of economic development and population growth, wildlife and so forth. And I always hear, particularly from the chamber of the folks, is as if the answer is just simply, your taxes too high, reduce your taxes. And I would agree with you that's one of the factors. But I want to urge this group to understand that in order to resolve that, it's going to take more than just reducing taxes, but we got to provide services. We got to look at a holistic approach. And what I mean by that is, we got to do a good job in investing in our infrastructure. We got to deal with inadequate housing. We got to deal with culture factors. There's so many other things we got to deal with if we're going to resolve this issue. But all I hear oftentimes is, let's, reduce your taxes, everything's gonna be fine. That's not going to happen, everything will not be fine. Let's work together on who's approach to resolve this issue. I just need to say that.
And what I was going to say in closing is I have a family member who sits on Spartanburg County Council, and so a lot of people don't understand the sacrifice that y'all make, the time commitment that you spend. I think probably a lot of people don't realize that people in your role have a larger responsibility than most state senators, legislators in terms of time commitments and running your own businesses and families. So thank you for doing that and spending time. Speaking of senators,
did anybody record that?
Gene Cecil can verify that. She knows what
I recorded that.
but speaking of your state assemblyman, I just want to make a plug for our next issues forum, which will be Tuesday following New Year's, Tuesday, January 4th. Be a very good, colorful event. We have Todd Rutherford coming, Kirkman Finley, and Nick Sessler, all confirmed. So if y'all want some good fireworks, and each of you gentlemen are welcome to come as well. And if you've got any good questions for me to spice up the event, then feel free to email them to Henry or Susan. But thank you both. Thank you everybody for coming today, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
That's great.